A very warm welcome to you, and thank you so much for joining our Homeopathy 24/7 podcast. We are going to be speaking to an array of international guests who will share their knowledge and experiences of homeopathy with you. We will discuss all types of subjects such as remedies, symptoms, and stories of health. No matter where you are with your homeopathic journey, we aim to inspire you on your quest to natural health and living. The podcast is brought to you by Mary Greensmith, the founder of Homeopathy 24/7, which is a global platform connecting you with a homeopath wherever you are in the world, 24 hours a day. So let's get started with today's chat. Please welcome Mary Greensmith.
Hello, great to see you. Lovely to see everybody. Thank you for joining us today. And I'm really excited to welcome Sunita Venchard. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, hi, Mary. Thank you so much for having me again. This is, I think, this is like the third time that we've done a podcast. So I really enjoyed doing them.
It's really easy to talk to you, Sunita, isn't it? And because of what you bring to homeopathy and how you explain things, I just think it's so exciting for people to see remedies in the way you see them, because you're so good at describing remedies.
Oh, thank you. I think what I really like to do is to help people understand remedies in a more creative way. Because, you know, when we're at college or when we're looking at remedies, when we're trying to find a remedy for a patient or a family member, it's sometimes really hard because you look through the Materia Medicas, the books that explain the remedies, and it's a kind of list of symptoms and a list of characteristics. It's really hard to put that into context in a way that is easy to remember and easy to understand. So for me, the idea of writing them in story form has really helped to bring them to life and to just, make it something that's easy to remember and easy to understand.
And I think that's what we take away from it, is that when somebody tells a story, you never forget that character.
Absolutely.
And if that character then is ingrained, it just when you see somebody, you're triggered, aren't you? And you remember, oh yeah, that's definitely got this remedy in it. So lovely today. So you thought that we could discuss a couple of remedies and perhaps you tell us a story as well.
Yeah. So what I thought I would do today is read a couple of the stories. So I'll read one first.
Okay.
The first one that I'm going to read is Sepia. Now, Sepia, I think for any mother out there, any woman really who's had kids, or even women who haven't had kids, is just a fantastic remedy. It's such a hormonal remedy. So I'm going to read the story that I wrote about Sepia, and it's called Sepia, a Worn Out Mom. So I'll read that now.
Thank you.
Okay. So Sophia looked in the mirror. Who was that woman staring back? The sagging skin, the yellowish brown tinge sitting across her nose and cheeks like a saddle. A heavy expression with no spark, no joy. Tears trickled slowly down the contours of her face. Why was she crying? She wasn't even sure, but not a day seemed to go by when she didn't. With the sleeve of her jumper, she wiped away the tears and took some deep breaths to stop the flow. If the tears continued, Sophia knew that she would feel worse, and today she was almost at breaking point. As she brushed her hair, she reflected on what brought her to feel this way. Was it the demands of 3 children in rapid succession? Could it be her husband whose touch she couldn't stand? Some days she wanted nothing more than to run away. Bit by bit, she could feel herself shutting down. Surely a mother should have a natural maternal love for her children, but then why did she constantly snap at them? Her shrieking voice echoed in her head. Guilt bubbled inside her, and she couldn't help thinking they deserved a better mother. At times like this, solitude was her friend. When her husband was at work and the kids were at school, she could breathe. There was space to gather her energy before the evening onslaught of cooking, feeding, bedtime routines. The list was endless. A wave of nausea hit her and brought back memories of pregnancy morning sickness, when the smell and the thought of food had made it worse. A smile almost reached her lips as she remembered her cliché craving for pickles. Even now she loved to eat them. It was mid-morning and she hadn't had breakfast yet. The left side of her head was beginning to throb. She really needed to eat, but sometimes no amount of food could ever fill that empty feeling inside. Sophia stood up and winced as a dull ache spread across her lower back. Since her last daughter was born 5 years ago, everything seemed to go south. Her insides felt as if they were dragging down and could almost fall out. Sometimes she even had to cross her legs in case. Maybe she'd contact that homeopath she'd seen after her first child. It really helped. In the kitchen, she turned on the radio, and the rhythmic beats of a disco record filled the air. What a great track! Her body started swaying to the pulsating sounds, and a lightness began to spread through her. Sophia moved with the beat around the kitchen as she cleared up the children's breakfast mess. Dancing always lifted her spirits. She glanced at her phone, wondering if she was too late to catch the dance aerobics class at the local gym. That always energized her. There was just enough time if she hurried. Hastily, she whizzed up a smoothie and sipped it as she left the house. The warm rays of the sun bathed her face. Maybe today wasn't going to be so bad after all.
Oh, that is so lovely. Gosh, what so many people will resonate with that picture.
Yeah, I think it's such a common picture for so many mums, especially, child after child. And what happens with sepia is that they are literally worn out. Their bodies, they get that really. So in the story, even in the story, I've mentioned that, the yellowish brown tinge across the face. So we often, I think, refer to that as cloasma, and that's quite a hormonal, they call it the brown saddle. And, that's quite common in a lot of women. And even, during the menopause, that often happens to women. And then going further along the story, the idea that, she couldn't stand her husband. And again, that's quite a common feeling.
Yeah.
When women have had children, it's, the last thing they want is to be around their husband. So again, that story brings out that. And then it touches on quite a common theme. She has flashbacks to her pregnancy morning sickness. And sepia is a huge morning sickness remedy. And it is very much that cliche of wanting pickles, that's the typical kind of sepia sort of symptom. So again, the story touches, upon that. And then the idea that they have that feeling that their insides, are dragging down and just as if, crossing your legs as if you feel everything is going to come out, and that heavy feeling, which women can often feel in pregnancy as well, with that weight of the baby, especially towards the end, sort of the pregnancy period. That's that huge heaviness and feeling like everything is just going to escape. So again, the story touches on those themes, and then the redeeming feature. I always try and have either a bit of an uplift in the story or a bit of a twist or something at the end. So for her, the dancing. So again, dancing and exercise is a great sort of mood reliever and energy reliever for sepia. They feel energized if they've moved around, if they've exercised, and it just brings up their spirits. So in this case, she listens to music, she dances, and suddenly she feels so much better. And then, that makes her think, oh, well, I'm going to go out and have some exercise. And, dancing particularly they love.
Yeah.
And then that, that turns her around. So from starting off feeling like she's hopeless, by the end of it, she feels, well, I'll go for a dance and, then I can sort of feel better.
Yes, yeah. It just has got so many different aspects. And of course, sepia is one of those remedies that we can drift in and out of.
Yeah.
And we can really need a sepia remedy for a very short time. And then you know, we bounce out of it as well. So, and also, of course, very, very important is worse after pregnancy as well. So
Yes,
people
yes.
whose symptoms have come on much worse after childbirth than that. And in your story, she's going back and thinking about that, and so it's bringing in so many aspects, isn't it?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, it is such a a hormonal, as you say, after pregnancy, but also, you know, I haven't touched on it in this particular story, but the menopause.
Yes.
So sepia is, you know, basically at every point in a woman's life when hormones are changing, sepia often comes into the fore. And, you know, for sort of, you know, menopausal women with the hot flushes and that sort of brown saddle on their skin, you know, again, it really is a lifesaver, I think, you know. And I know for me, you know, definitely when I was pregnant and I'd had my daughter, it helped me so many times. So, you know, I think for women out there, it's definitely a remedy that they ought to consider if they're going through these kind of changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think changes is the word there, isn't it? The transition through hormone change. So, you know, right from the beginning. So it is something, it is a remedy that's suitable for all ages, really, as we're going through those transitional stages. Absolutely brilliant. Loved it. Thank you so much. Let's talk about arsenicum.
Yeah, so again, so the next remedy is arsenicum album, which a lot of people will have in, you know, if they've got any first aid kits at home, it's definitely one to have in your first aid kit. But as well as being an acute remedy, it's also got quite a big, sort of deeper constitutional picture. And so this story sort of tries to bring out aspects of both, really, the acute side as well as, you know, the deeper constitutional picture. So let me just have a drink before I read this. So this is called A Difficult Night for Arsenicum album. And the reason for that is that nighttime is often the time that they're aggravated, that, you know, their symptoms come out more strongly. So, yeah, I'll start. So Arsenio's eyes flung open with a start, and he turned to look at the clock on his nightstand. It was midnight. What was that loud thud? Was it in his dream, or could it be a burglar? His heart raced in his chest. Did he remember to lock the front door? He held his breath so that he could listen, but all he could hear was the pounding of his heart. Should he go down to investigate? Normally, his brother was around, but he had left earlier on a business trip. Arsenio didn't like to admit it, but he was always more anxious when his brother wasn't at home. The irony was he hardly talked to his brother, but just his presence calmed him. There was no chance of sleeping now, so he jumped out of bed, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders like a cape. Arsenio definitely didn't feel like a superhero. The thought of going downstairs was overwhelming, so instead he locked his bedroom door and paced the floor, still chilly despite the blanket. He stopped to listen again and sighed in relief as all was silent. To make sure, he pushed the curtain aside to look out. Everything was quiet. The pale glow of the street lamps revealed nothing unusual. His heart, however, was still pounding. Is that how a heart attack starts? He had seen a doctor a few months ago about his heart, as occasionally he suffered from palpitations, especially when he was worried. The doctor had assured him that it was just anxiety, but Arsenio wasn't convinced. Instead, he called a medical helpline, and they too said the same thing. Arsenio still felt that they had missed something, so he had booked to see a private consultant in a few weeks. He hated spending the money, but what if there was something seriously wrong? Finally, his heart started to calm down, but now he had a burning feeling in his stomach. He could almost feel the acid in his throat. This wasn't the first time he had experienced this. His thoughts returned to a few weeks earlier when the burning had been like hot coals. It was agony, and he really panicked, almost visiting the ER. Eventually, his brother managed to reassure him, figuring it to be a reaction to some old ice cream he had eaten. Arsenio didn't even really like cold food, but a friend had bought him some ice cream ages ago, and while clearing his freezer, he hadn't wanted to waste it. That had been an awful night, with burning turning into several bouts of exhausting diarrhea. Maybe a warm drink would settle his stomach. Furtively, he made his way down to the kitchen, relieved that all was still and quiet. He switched on the kitchen light, and his eyes were immediately drawn to the dirty cup and plate left on the worktop. Why couldn't his brother clean up after himself? As he washed and dried the dishes, he thought of how his brother always teased him about his tidiness. Arsenio couldn't understand why everyone wasn't as orderly as him. He opened the cupboard to put the cup and plate back. Everything was organised efficiently. Rows upon rows of crockery, some almost as old as he was. He hated throwing out anything that was still useful. With a warm drink in his hand, he made his way back up to bed. He took sips of the warm liquid and felt it soothe his throat and stomach. His eyes were beginning to feel heavy, and he glanced at the clock. It was 3 a.m. As he drifted off to sleep, it occurred to him that nothing dangerous had actually happened that night, and he had just spent hours worrying for no reason.
So, yeah.
Thank you. So again, with this story, you can see that obviously Arsenicum album is a remedy that really suffers a lot from anxiety. And, the final sort of message in that story was that all of it was in his imagination, that he had spent the whole night worrying about, was there a robber, burglar? Arsenicum can be worried about people invading their homes. So, he started off worried about that. Then, that moved into his health, because obviously his heart was pounding, and they can be very hypochondriacal.
Yes.
So it shows in that story that, he thought, oh, am I going to have a heart attack?
Yeah.
And then, he talks about how he'd been to see the doctor, and even though the doctor had assured him, he still wasn't reassured. So then he'd rung up a sort of helpline, and he still wasn't reassured, and then he's now booked in to see a consultant. And you often get that with people who need arsenicum, and I'm sure you must have had.
And we say quite often, don't we? Yes, if we have received a message during the night, we know which remedy they need.
Absolutely. And so, it started up at midnight, and midnight is their time of is when they're aggravated.
Yes.
And then it goes on until sort of like 3 a.m. in the morning. So, so they're very hard to reassure, but they do need company, and they're very dependent upon their family. As it said, he wanted his brother to be around, but they're not that nice to their family. They just want them to be around, but they don't necessarily spend a lot of time sort of interacting with them. So, yes, so they need the company. And then, he went on to talk about sort of burning feelings, and burning is a huge sort of trademark of needing arsenicum. They have, burning sensations of acid in their throat, burning in their stomach, and their pains are generally kind of burning in nature. And it moved on to talk about having diarrhea and, cold foods. And, arsenicum is like number one for food poisoning. It's one of the first remedies you consider. If you've had food poisoning and you get the cramps and the burning, exhausting sort of bouts of diarrhea. It also showed the restlessness. He was walking backwards and forwards in his room, not knowing what to do. And again, that's one of the things that arsenicum does, that, in the night when they can't settle, they're just restless. They don't know what to do with themselves. They get up, they pace the floor, and that's exactly what he did. And then as he made his way down to the kitchen, after all that anxiety, he was then concerned about a dirty cup and a plate, because they're very fastidious and very tidy. So, so that's another side of them. They like everything to be very orderly. And, so he was kind of upset that his brother had left a mess, and then finally, warmth helps them. So after all this chilliness and burning and cold and upset stomach, then having a warm drink or wrapping themselves up often helps them. And so he had his warm drink, and he finally started to drift back off to sleep. And, you know, with that kind of sort of idea that, well, actually nothing really happened.
No, there's such a lot of depth there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is such a huge remedy anyway, and
Yeah.
we've got all of those acute symptoms, and
Yeah.
that's the reason it's in our first aid, you know, kits. But of course, it's such a big constitutional remedy because we all know somebody who is very arsenicum, don't we?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you know, the way that they are and everything about them. And so this just typifies you know, how to recognize an arsenicum character. It's such a lovely way of bringing all of that information into one small space.
Thank you. So what I do when I write the stories, it does take me quite a long time to actually write the story. So what I do is I look through the, you know, obviously I kind of know, I know the remedies, but in order to sort of create a story, I have to sort of bring all the main symptoms. So I go through the repertory and I look at all the kind of strongest symptoms for the remedies.
Yes.
And then I sort of jot those down. Sometimes I make a mind map, you know, and I've actually sort of published the mind maps, you know, that I've done with the remedies sometimes as a kind of additional learning aid.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah, and then once I've done that, then I start to think, you know, about, well, how can this present as a character? You know, what would be the storyline for that? And then I think at that point, creativity and intuition takes over, and I suddenly start to get sort of snapshots, you know. But then when you look at each of the symptoms, you know, that suddenly gives you an idea for, oh, you know, I could bring in his tidiness, you know, going down to the kitchen, all this mess there, you know, I can bring that aspect in.
Yes.
And with Sepia, you know, this idea of how do I bring in the idea that they have a kind of saddle or brown tinge on their nose? Well, obviously, like looking in the mirror, they're very unhappy, and the way they look, and, you know, and then that dragging down feeling. So as you look through the symptoms, you're then just able to craft sort of sentences that bring in each of the symptoms. And then, you know, the story sort of starts to come to life and come to shape, you know. And but yeah, it does take quite a while to do each one. So I think I've done you know 7 or 8 now, and I think eventually I'm going to put them into a book.
Fantastic.
And, you know, and maybe also put a few study aids into a book with them. And you know, and I think I'll carry on doing it because I really enjoy sort of bringing the remedies to life. You know,
it's such a beautiful way for people to learn about it. So where are the short stories available at the moment? Are they on your website? Can people go to your website?
Yes. So at the moment, you know, I put them. I tend to publish them on my Facebook page first, and then after that, once you know I have the time, then I post them onto my website. So there is actually a page on my website called, you know, Homeopathic Remedy Stories, and I think it's got I think I've done 6 or 7 now. So I think, you know, most of them are on there. I've got a couple of more left to load onto there.
Excellent. I was just thinking that if we put your link down below so people can go and visit, because what we really want is them to give you a thumbs up and to say, keep on writing, please keep on writing, please put this forward as a book, because we definitely do need to know more about it, and to help people learning about constitutional remedies. This is such a beautiful way forward. So please, everybody listening, if you'd like Sunita to do some more, please do send us a message, let us know.
That would be great.
Yeah, keep following. And of course, on the website, you'll see the other books that Sunita publishes, and carry on doing your brilliant work. It's just fantastic that we have this learning opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you for your time. Lovely speaking to you.
It's been good fun. Thank you.
We'll catch you again very soon. Thank you so much, Sunita, for going through the constitutional remedies, how you're creating Such brilliant stories. These are going to be so useful for people getting to know homeopathy and, of course, revising all of the aspects of different remedies that it takes a while to get to know, and this will just bring it to life for so many people. So lovely talking to you. Thank you so much. Next week, we will be joined by Stephanie Thullen. Stephanie is one of our homeopaths from Homeopathy 24/7, and she will be discussing human design, which is a different energy healing medium, a way of getting to know yourself, why you are what you are, why you feel what you feel, why you do what you do, why you interact the way that you interact. It's just about understanding what makes you you. So it's going to be a really interesting discussion, and I look forward to having you join us. See you then.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode and look forward to listening to our next one. Please don't forget to follow our podcast on your chosen channel, and please do leave us a review so we can continue to share homeopathy with as many people as possible. If you do have any questions, please do reach out to us on any of our social platforms mentioned in the show notes. We at Homeopathy 24/7 hope to empower you on your natural health journey.